I read 8 books in July, so let's talk about them. To kick off the month, I went for one of my Libby holds that came through, which was a YA romance called Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. This book centers around main character Millie Quint as she discovers her sort of girlfriend, sort of best friend has been kissing somebody else, and as a result she decides to uproot her entire life in Texas and move to Scotland to complete her senior year of high school. Conveniently, the boarding school that she's selected in Scotland has offered her a full ride scholarship, so she is able to go. Upon arriving, she discovers that her roommate is a total diva, and she also happens to be the Princess of Scotland. The girls really don't like each other. They get off to a very bad start, and Flora is the princess. Flora kind of solidifies herself as Millie's enemy by doing anything and everything to get kicked out of the school, while somehow roping Millie into her shenanigans in the process. It starts off with the girls really not liking each other. They slowly evolve into a friendship, and of course the end result is them falling in love with each other. And you know, it is a romance, so there's the third act conflict that always comes in, but with this one it kind of came in at the 80 or 90% mark, which left very little time to resolve the conflict. The book ends very abruptly for me. It was really building up to be a 4-star read for me, but with how fast the book just ends, I could not warrant it being a 4-star read. So I did give this one 3 stars. I think perhaps I might have been a little too old for the novel, and that's okay. It still was fun, it still was cute. I don't think that I would read the other book that's associated with the series. After I finished Her Royal Highness, I moved into a physical book that I borrowed from my library, which was called The Silent Wife by A.S.A. Harrison. This book centers around our main characters, him and her, whose names are Todd and Jody. Todd and Jody have been together for 28 years. They are basically common law married, though the book does emphasize that they have never been married. They do not have children together. They do not want to get married. They do not want children together. They just have this really convenient, affluent life in Chicago that they're living together. Todd is a notorious cheater, and Jody likes to turn a blind eye. But when Todd's 23-year-old mistress falls pregnant and he decides to leave Jody, that's when she can no longer turn her blind eye. So she is trying to figure out how to maintain this life that they've built together in Chicago, while he is setting up his little love nest for his pregnant mistress. It's marketed as a psychological thriller, but I didn't really view it as a psychological thriller. It was more of a drama to me. While Jody was very like, how do I get rid of my not husband because I don't get anything in a separation because we're not married, it wasn't very thrillery, and I think that's because I read a lot of slasher kind of thrillers. The age gap romance was weird to me because Todd knew the girl that he was in a relationship with since she was born, so it kind of gives grooming, if you will. I did not like that. And also, as I sat down to write up my notes for the books that I read this month, I literally could not remember the ending, which to me means that it was not a good enough read for me, because if I can't remember the ending, it wasn't very good. I know that this book did have a lot of pretty high reviews on Goodreads, and I think that this is just under the category of some books aren't for you, and that was definitely the case with this. I did end up giving it 2 stars. I was not a fan. It just wasn't it for me. After I finished up The Silent Wife, it was time to move into my book club selection. I have a book club with my friends. It's called the Murder Row Book Club. This month our book was selected by my friend Ashley, and she chose Tapestry by Beth Duke, which focuses on the main character Skye Willis as she's trying to discover herself, if you will. So Skye's friends are all moving on to like big things, and the big things that are harped on in the book are like the Army National Guard or becoming cops, while Skye is stuck working at this Mexican restaurant in her town. Skye's Grammy insists that she is part Muskogee Creek, and Skye's Grammy and Skye's mother have always led Skye to believe that she lost her father in Afghanistan, and Skye doesn't really think that that's true because they won't tell her anything about his family or anything really about him other than he died in Afghanistan. So she convinces her grandma to do like an ancestry DNA test, and they discover that, of course, Grammy is part Creek, and Sky is not the descendant of this man who did die in Afghanistan. The shock to me, the shock value of that to me was really not necessary. I was not a huge fan of this book. The only part that I found even remotely interesting is when Sky is contemplating joining the Navy, and that's not even because she contemplates joining the Navy and I was in the Navy. It's interesting to me because the job or rating that she's contemplating going into is actually a rating that I work pretty closely with in my civilian job. So I just thought that part was interesting. I liked the character of Grammy. She had some really funny quips in the book, but other than that, I found everybody else just genuinely unlikable. I did not like the rotating timeline between Alabama and Texas. As it turns out, Sky's actual father is this Texas oil man, and he's kind of a jerk. And by kind of, I mean he's really a jerk, and his wife is extremely racist. I felt like I expected something different when we picked this book up, and I really just, as I was reading, could not wait to be finished. And when I was done, I was extremely mad because there's an epilogue to the book that focuses entirely on the absolute worst character in the book, and I could not figure out why she needed or deserved an epilogue. 2 stars for Tapestry for me, and when I finished that, I was like, it's time for another thriller, so I moved into Never Have I Ever by Jocelyn Jackson, which is about our main character, Amy. Amy has a pretty ordinary life. It's shaken up one evening as the person who's renting out the Airbnb in the neighborhood, Rue, comes in and interferes with the book club that Amy and her friend Charlotte host for their neighborhood. Rue enters and completely derails the meeting with a game of Never Have I Ever. Amy kind of sees through this game and suspects that Rue knows something about her deepest and darkest secret. She ends up being blackmailed by Rue to tell her deepest and darkest secret to completely ruin her life. Amy doesn't give in to Rue's blackmail. Rue decides that she's gonna tell Amy's secret. I really felt like this book started off strong for me, albeit the dialogue was a little bit weird in some places. It was really fun for me trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, trying to figure out how Rue knew what Amy did. But in the end, as we got closer and closer and closer to the end, I just couldn't figure out how some of the pieces were fitting together. The dialogue became repetitive. It was just a bunch of Rue being like, no, you have to do this. No, you have to do this. No, you have to do this. And I kind of got tired of it. But the very end was an absolute nightmare for me. It was completely unnecessary. I really did not feel like it made sense for the storyline to go in this direction. And I will just say it was absolutely disgusting. If I were reviewing this book like on my old blog, this would be like bottom line up front, there's pedophilia in it. And I would not have picked this book up if I would have known. Now, when I am perusing Goodreads to find books to read, I kind of look at ratings and see what's kind of highly rated. And this book has a 3.74 overall rating on Goodreads. None of the reviews talk about it having pedophilia in it. Actually, there are some 5-star reviews on Goodreads, which was really surprising to me after I finished this book. A lot of the reviews that I read after the fact did give it 1 and 2 stars. Some people did not leave written reviews. They just kind of rated it 1 or 2 stars and kept it moving. I gave 1 star on Goodreads just because that's what I do if I DNF a book or I absolutely hate it like I did this one. So 1 star. Oh, I also borrowed Never Have I Ever from my library. That was a Kindle book, so I borrowed it via Libby, as is the case for the next book, which is The Invited by Jennifer McMahon. This book centers around Helen and Nate, who decide to give up their very comfortable life in suburban Connecticut and move to 44 acres of rural land in Vermont, where they take on the ultimate DIY project of building their own house, which is so fun. I love the concept. They soon discover, though, that their property is beautiful but has a dark and violent past. Helen's a former middle school history teacher. She becomes entirely consumed with like unraveling the history of this property. Basically, the history is a century before Helen and Nate moved to the property, a woman named Hattie Breckenridge lived and was killed on the property. Helen's passion becomes all-consuming. She ends up buying these historical artifacts and bringing them into their home, which results in the house becoming haunted. Goodreads markets The Invited as a horror novel, but I did not really view it as a horror novel. To me, it was a paranormal thriller. I found it incredibly gripping. I really couldn't put it down. I kept thinking about it. And I think that I personally rated it so highly because I came into it after I just finished Never Have I Ever, and I was so disappointed in that book that I really just was hoping for a good read the next time. And this definitely was good. I wish that it had been a little bit scarier. It was not quite scary enough for me to fit the bill of a horror novel, but I really did enjoy it and I gave it 4 stars. I really stuck with thrillers this month, and after I finished The Invited, I picked up The Other Husband by Catherine Croft, which was another Libby hold. All of my Libby holds like came through at once in July. It was incredible. The Other Husband follows 2 main characters, Abby and Sienna. They meet one day and become incredibly fast friends. They have a dinner party with their husbands. Sienna decides that maybe they should play a fun game of wife swap, but with the husbands instead of the wives. So Abby's husband stays with Sienna, and Sienna's husband goes home with Abby. Basically, Abby finds out from Greg, which is Sienna's husband, something horrible that he's done. She confesses something horrible that she's done. She's trying to get Greg to tell Sienna what he's done. Greg is blackmailing Abby that he's gonna tell Rob what she's done. And then Greg goes missing. So basically we're following Abby and Sienna around as they try to figure out where Greg has gone. It's full of accusations. It's so dramatic. I really, really liked it up until the end. I think that I just don't like anything that has something horrible happening to children in the books, and this one has a lot of child manipulation at the end, and maybe it's because I'm a mom now, but everything about the end of this book just really hurt my soul. Basically, without providing any spoilers, the end is this child has been manipulated by somebody who is supposed to love him unconditionally and ends up doing something so unforgivable. I just could not move past the end of this. It really, really made me so upset. I think that what was going on is that the author was trying to go for the biggest shock value, and I did not think that that was necessary. It was an unsuspected twist, but I did not like it. So I gave the book 2 stars, and then we moved on to listening to the only audiobook that I listened to this month, which was The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda. I think that my problem with this book is that I tried to listen to it while I was at work, and work was incredibly busy for me in July, so I really don't think that I grasped fully all of the twists and turns that came along with this thriller. Basically, the book starts off with a group of friends meeting up for the 10-year anniversary of this great tragedy that happened to them while they were in high school, only to have one of those survivors of the tragedy to disappear at the beginning of the book. I did find the full cast narration to help me pay attention a little bit to this book, but I think that I just kind of tuned it out while I was working, and it just was noise in the background for me as I was working. I did start paying attention at the end, so I do know how it ends. I found the end to be very, very shocking. I enjoyed it, but I don't feel like I could properly give this a full review because, like I said, I just tuned it out. With the end, I gave it a 3-star review. From what I remember of the book, it was very good. I don't think that I would circle back to reread it in a physical or ebook form, but yeah, it was nice. It was read by a full cast. To close out the month, my last hold came through that I was waiting for, and it was The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren, and I've been waiting for this book to come through since I found out that it was going to be released. I'm sure that everybody's heard, but The True Love Experiment focuses on Fizzy Chen, who is a side character in Christina Lauren's The Soulmate Equation. So Fizzy ends up being headhunted by the producer of this reality television show, which is coined The True Love Experiment. She and the producer develop this very likable relationship with each other. I really liked to be able to revisit this world that was created in The Soulmate Equation and get to see more Fizzy. She's just so funny as a character. I had moments of laughing out loud, moments where I was reading out loud from the book to my husband so that he could share in the laughter with me. I think that my main issue with the book is, again, the third act conflict. For someone who is able to communicate so well for both parties, Connor and Fizzy, it just felt like the lack of communication was disheartening to me. The conflict centers entirely around a miscommunication, or inability to communicate rather, and I just didn't feel like it was like real enough. It felt so silly and stupid, and it took too long to resolve over something so small, I guess. Regardless, I do love most of Christina Lauren's books. I absolutely devoured Fizzy's story. I think it was the perfect way to end this lackluster month of reading, and I did give the book 4 stars. Now, I think that it's fun to kind of do some statistics for me. Like I said at the beginning, I read 8 books this month. That was 2,384 pages. I spent 10 hours and 6 minutes listening to that audiobook. I read every single day, averaging about 76.9 pages per day. 6 ebooks, 1 audiobook, 1 physical book, and my average rating for the month of July was 2.75 stars. So I'm really hoping that August will yield some more good books. Yeah, so what I'd like to know in the comments below this week is, what was the best book that you read in July? What was the worst book in July? Or what are you most looking forward to read in August? And with that, I will see you next week.